Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Hazing Prevention Webinar for Parents and Families. My name is Jenny Walker and I serve as the Prevention and Risk Management Coordinator in the Office of the Dean of Students and also as the Hazing Prevention and Education Co-Chair for our committee here at UT Austin. We're really excited to be with you here today, but it's not just me speaking. You'll get to meet a lot of guest speakers throughout the next little bit of time together. So I'll go ahead and allow some of our guest speakers today to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hello everybody, my name is Brendan Nailing and I am currently a third-year nursing student at UT Austin. I also serve as the Texas Asian Panhellenic Council President. I'm also part of Omega Phi Gamma fraternity.
Hey y'all, my name is Nikki Jackson and I am the Texas Gymnastics Club Women's President. I am a master's student with a focus on public health, and I have been on the team. This will be my 5th year.
Hello Longhorns, my name is Chad Zimmerman. I serve as the Senior Assistant Director for Sport Clubs with recreational sports. I've served in this role for 5 years, helping out our sponsored student organizations.
Hi everyone, my name is Marilyn Russell and I'm the Director of Sorority and Fraternity Life at UT. I have been working in our office and then in that role just over 11 years now, actually working with our sorority and fraternity community, and also have been part of the Hazing Prevention and Education Committee for a number of years.
Perfect. Thank you all for introducing yourself. Like I said, our guest speakers will be coming back and guiding you all that are joining this webinar throughout the rest of the content. This webinar, though, is hosted by the Hazing Prevention and Education Committee at the University of Texas at Austin. This is a committee that is a coalition of students, staff, faculty, and campus stakeholders at UT, really focused on building a comprehensive approach to hazing prevention for the entire institution. This committee was formed in 2013, and our membership really varies and represents a lot of different folks from across campus, whether it be recreational sports or sorority and fraternity life, as you heard it, folks introducing themselves. But we also have representatives from Texas Parents, Student Emergency Services, or even the Longhorn Wellness Center as well. So it's a really robust and awesome group of folks that are part of our committee and part of our work. So ultimately, the purpose that we're here today and here to talk with you all is to discuss the key concepts of hazing and also hazing prevention, and to provide you with the tools to help you and your student as they're at experiencing student organization life at UT. But before I hand things over to our guest speakers, just a few housekeeping items. So we do ask that you give us a little bit of grace. We are recording this remotely, so we're doing our best to minimize any background noises, but please do understand there may be some background noise and we'll do our best to minimize it throughout. Also, just so you know, when we refer to student organizations throughout this workshop, we are really talking about all student organizations. At UT, we have 1,200 different student organizations that span from sororities and fraternities, sports teams, to professional groups, academic groups, or service organizations. So just so you know, whenever we're referencing student organizations throughout this webinar, we are talking about all 1,200 of those. And then last but not least would be, kind of want to at least acknowledge the context of our current reality. Given COVID-19, we are not together as staff and students on campus, and all of our student organizations are not really able to meet together right now. But we really still see this work as critical to not only ensure that our students remain safe while they're engaging virtually with one another, but also to make sure that we're set up for success when students are able to be back on campus and back in community with one another. So we'll talk about kind of how COVID will impact our work and our reality throughout this webinar, but just want to make sure that we're addressing it on the front end as well. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Marilyn and the rest of our speakers.
All right, well, so we're just going to jump right in. One of the really strong beliefs about this presentation is that we want to start with a strong foundation, and understanding and having a shared definition of what hazing means really is a great place to start. So we will just dive right in. So in our next slide, you will see this long definition. Obviously, this is what our institutional definition looks like. And of course is as thorough as can be, without, probably we could add lots and lots more words here to continue to clarify. But there are some elements that I really like to dig into whenever I talk about this definition, or even just whenever we as a team, or even as a committee, when we talk about what is hazing. So it's important to think about it as, again, as it mentions there, any intentional, knowing, or reckless act that occurs on or off of the campus of an educational institution. So it's been the policy for years for UT actually that whether something happens on or off campus. However, just this past fall with the passing of an updated bill really has a deeper meaning. So now the updated law, which was in fact which went into effect in September of 2019, allows for a change in venue to occur. So now if the hazing violation is reported off campus, or even in a different county, the allegation can still come back and be prosecuted in Travis County. So that is a pretty big change in process, in how this existing definition now is applied in real time. Something else that I like to talk about a bit is the endangers the mental or physical health or safety of a person. So a lot of times I think whenever we talk about hazing, people go immediately to things that they've seen in media, or maybe the more extreme, violent, even student deaths that maybe you're aware of or have heard of. And I think what's really important about this definition is that we also play an importance in understanding that there is a mental aspect that is also part of this, and that it is not just about the physicality or any kind of violent acts, but that it actually is a range of impacts, and that depending on how a person perceives their experiences, that it's all encompassed in the definition of hazing. So another thing that I think is interesting to point out, and sometimes is unknown, is that while a lot of folks will think about hazing as part of a rite of passage, or maybe whenever you're joining an organization where it says their purpose of pledging, being initiated into, affiliating with, holding office in, or maintaining membership. Oftentimes we don't think about the fact that there might be rites of passages sometimes for gaining an officer position or just staying in the organization. And again, the impact that can be felt by an individual member can be perceived or interpreted as hazing behaviors, and or sometimes they can be on a range, you'll learn about the spectrum here in a moment, but they can be on a range. And so the ability for someone to maintain their membership becomes hinged on the idea of them doing something or participating in something that they might not feel comfortable in. And that in and of itself could also be considered hazing. So it's quite a range. It certainly encompasses a lot of activities and behaviors. And really the main point about understanding and knowing all of this would be that at UT, we want to ensure that our students can join a student organization and feel a sense of belonging without endangering their safety or well-being. So again, we think it's a collective need for us to understand both you as our community and support to our students and our faculty and staff here on campus to understand what hazing really is from the get-go, so that we can actually really start to prevent and intervene as we see behaviors pop up, or as we hear conversations, or as we understand things that might be in play within our organization culture here at UT. So something that I alluded to was the updated state law. And so we wanted to dig in just briefly because there's a lot about this updated law that really is important for you to understand. So not only are students held to the institutional rules at UT Austin, and that's the definition that you just saw before, but hazing is also against the law in the state of Texas. So again, just this past legislative session in the fall, these updates were passed. And so I'm going to dig in just briefly on the things that that we want to make sure that you understand have been clarified or changed a bit. So the first one being the expanding of the description of organizations. So the organizations that were referenced before were sorority, fraternity, association, corporation, orders, societies. Now it's been broadened quite a bit. And again, just like Jenny said whenever we started, we're talking about all student organizations. And so the definition now references student government, musical groups or bands, academic, athletic, cheerleading and dance teams, including any student organization that participates in NCAA competitions. So again, really understanding that cases across the country really reflect that reality, that it's not just marred in one type of organization experience, but that hazing does occur in many type of organizations. And certainly once we have groups together, making choices sometimes can lend themselves to hazing activities. So now the definition represents that a bit better. Also clarified the definition of hazing just in general. So the point being there was that actually now the definition in the state law makes it easier to prosecute. And again, that's just another major clarification I would say that was made this past fall. Explicitly outlawing coerced consumption of an illegal substance. So now what this means is that an amount that a reasonable person would conclude results in intoxication. So now there's actually a criminal element that is part of this law, which wasn't there before. So again, this is a big addition to this law. Immunity. So create civil and criminal immunity to any person who voluntarily reports a specific hazing incident in good faith, provided the reporter is not the perpetrator. And again, immunity has been something that's been part of our institutional rule for a long time, but now having it stated in the state law is helpful. As mentioned before, it creates new change of venue provisions. So we talked about that in the last slide, and that location really doesn't matter because now it can be prosecuted in Travis County. And then lastly, expanding the reporting of institutions of higher education. So requiring certain communications to go out to incoming students, requiring information be held online in a public forum so it's easily accessible by the public. Those are all things that have been improved and certainly moved for more transparency around hazing behavior, and as we are finding that and investigating that here on campus, that we're communicating that to our constituents. So across the state of Texas, all of these things have now been implemented as part of that update and are certainly something for all parents and families and certainly all of our students, faculty, and staff to be aware of.
So ultimately, when we talk about hazing, there's a wide range of behaviors that are considered hazing that might fall on a spectrum. This image below shows that the spectrum of hazing and highlights a few different things for us. First, there's various forms and examples of hazing. Secondly, how frequently they might actually occur, and the amount of recognition or attention each receives in society and the media. To break this down, let's start with the right side of the spectrum. On the right side, we see more violent acts such as paddling and forced alcohol consumption. These behaviors are more easily recognized as forms of hazing by society and within the media, but in actuality, they occur much less frequently than some of the other behaviors you see towards the left side of the spectrum that are more intimidating or harassing in nature and often more subtle. And see in this right corner, we see things that you hear such as branding, forced ingestion of vile substances, water intoxication, abductions as kidnaps. And speaking on the left side of the spectrum, as you can see, these hazing behaviors are much more subtle in nature and are more focused on intimidation and harassment. Behaviors can include things like expecting students to have certain items in their possession at all times, whether it be in their backpacks, on their person, things like that. It could also include verbal abuse or degrading attire that they must wear. These activities often receive much lower recognition of acts of hazing by people and are oftentimes just brushed off as harmless or just a joke because they indeed still cause harm and they actually occur much more frequently than other forms of hazing that you might normally think of. At UT, we are concerned with all forms of hazing because we understand that some of these behaviors on the left side of the spectrum, when recognized as acceptable, contribute to a larger culture of hazing. So what starts off as a benign activity or good idea can often year over year grow into something that's much more violent in nature, such as adding alcohol to a ritual of an organization. The intent was never to create an unsafe environment for students, but unchecked and over time grow into traditions that can be problematic. Another way to think about this is where some activities generations ago might have been laughable or acceptable. We also know that any abuse of power coupled with intimidation or harassment can set a foundation for more overt forms of physical and emotional violence, often creating spaces where students try to outdo what was done in the past, leading to more violent behaviors. The specific behaviors we're seeing most often at UT Austin, according to our 2018 campus hazing assessment and through cases investigated through our student conduct office, span behaviors across the spectrum of hazing. Hazing activities range from sleep deprivation, forced consumption of alcohol, and servitude, to more physical acts such as forced calisthenics and confinement to small spaces, just to name a few that is on the screen. Another dynamic to consider is that regardless of a person's willingness to participate, that hazing is an abuse of power within a group or organization. When a student has a desire to belong and feels the peer pressure to participate, an intimidating, coercive environment is what results. The student is unable to consent to certain activities or practices, even if he or she is willing or even actually volunteers to do so. So when you go back to the hazing definition and recognize the environment I just outlined, what we see are students who might never be willing to do such tasks in normal circumstances, but giving the peer pressure coupled with a desire to belong to this organization will compromise themselves for the purpose of being accepted.
Okay, and as mentioned earlier, given that we're living in this age of social distancing and virtual engagement due to the coronavirus, it's important to emphasize that regardless of our students, if they're meeting in person or virtually or in a hybrid environment, that they're expected to follow UT institutional policies and obviously the state law and federal laws. And that truthfully, we don't know exactly what this virtual experience in student organizations is really going to provide, but our feeling is that this topic is still very relevant, and that our aim is for student organizations to use this time, hopefully, to let go of any harmful hazing traditions that they may have had and truly realize the importance of their community and their ability to maintain healthy group relationships without any of that behavior. If any students that you know are struggling to maintain that community right now in this time of social distancing, you can encourage your students to reach out to us on campus, the Student Activities Office, who works with all of our student organizations, my office, Sorority Fraternity Life, to get resources. Certainly Chad and his team. We've got folks all on the committee, as Jenny mentioned earlier, that are engaged in student organization support, and really would love to continue to give better resources to our student organizations as they make these updates and changes to this virtual environment. And at the same time, I think grapple with how they have a student organization experience that is similar to or can uphold as much of that old experience that they've had and that they love and they want to be connected to, that's still very positive. So all of this being said, the reason that we do this work and the reason that we do what we do is to ensure that our students are safe. Hazing can have real impacts on our students in a variety of ways, and from emotional harm, damaged relationships, a decline in academic success, or more physical harms that maybe include potentially injuries, or have even brought upon student deaths in the past. Our goal is to work with you as families and as stakeholders in all of this important life experience to ensure that these impacts are not seen among your students and that our community stays healthy and safe and provides opportunities for engagement that is positive and lets everyone leave with a really great Longhorn experience.
So with all that being said, let's look at what hazing looks like specifically at UT. Before we get into specifics, it is important to highlight that students do not come to college campuses as blank slates. Their past experience informed them, including as it relates to hazing, whether it's seeing hazing depicted in pop culture or media or whatever they see on TV, or experiencing hazing themselves in high school. Students often already have normalized their experiences or beliefs about hazing. Some find it acceptable to join or to maintain membership in an organization, whereas others have strong feelings about having been hazed in the past and it being unacceptable. It's also important to realize that your personal past experiences as a parent in a student organization may not reflect the current climate. That being said, in 2018, we partnered with a research consortium surveying a random sampling of undergraduate students about hazing at UT. 1,000 students spanning student organizations affiliations participated, and 26.9% reported experiencing at least one behavior that met the definition of hazing. Of that 26.9% of students who reported experiencing at least one behavior that met the definition of hazing, only 1.9% actually self-identified as being hazing. For us, this is significant because the numbers don't match up. Roughly 25% of the students say, yes, I've gone through these experiences, but they didn't feel like they were being hazed. Similar to high school students, we're seeing our students normalize this behavior as part of joining an organization that they might not recognize some of the more subtle forms of hazing as problematic.
Also, the survey results showed that students that have experienced some form of hazing come from a wide range of organizations. Although fraternities and sororities represent 21%, take a moment to look at the variety of organizations that students identified. It might surprise you that hazing is not just a sorority and fraternity thing, but something that impacts many UT students and organizations and teams. Some good news in all of this information is that the survey also showed that students overwhelmingly, over 90%, believe that they do not need to be hazed to feel like they belong to a group. And this really speaks to the evolution of this topic among students today. In addition, 70% realized that it is not an effective way to create bonding, and there is no good reason to haze new members of a group. Students also recognize it can cause physical and emotional harm, and it is not productive. Finally, the research goes on to show that students oftentimes choose to share their experience with a peer or a family member, rather than speaking with a university official or administrator. What is not surprising is that they don't want to speak to the university officials, but what has a lot of potential is the likelihood to connect to someone in their life, a friend or partner, and maybe most important, with you, the family members. Which means you can be the person your student opens up to about hazing. We see this as an opportunity to work together. Understanding as parents, you can be key influencers of your students. We want to make sure that you are equipped to have those challenging conversations with your student. Your understanding of hazing and other high-risk behaviors will better position you to be a good support system, a solid sounding board, and a knowledgeable resource to your student. With that being said, let's talk about what your role can look like as a parent or a family member. Before we get into the details of this section, it is important for us to acknowledge a few things. First, you know your student best and you know how to have conversations with them. We simply hope this next section will provide some language and information to support the strong relationship you already have. Secondly, we strongly encourage you to have these challenging conversations and to ensure that your student understands your stance on hazing and other high-risk behaviors. Ultimately, we hope that if your student turns to you, you feel equipped with the language, knowledge, and resources to be a support system.
A strong support system requires awareness of the info that we've reviewed thus far, what hazing is, what the impact of hazing is, and what we see at UT Austin. So the next important piece of providing that support for your student is oftentimes simply being aware of the possible signs of hazing. Over the next two slides, we'll review 13 possible signs. Although the signs listed may be signs for other stressors besides hazing, these signs combined with greater context clues are oftentimes a sign that hazing may be occurring. So some of the signs that you may see include unexplainable injuries or a reluctance to share where an injury came from, sleep deprivation, feelings of isolation, excessive alcohol consumption, unusual trips to the ER or doctor, unusual changes to attire or physical appearance. The key is seeing if what you're hearing from your student is connecting with their organization's activities. For example, if the student were to say, I wish I could ride my bike or the bus to class since it's cold outside, but I can't use anything with wheels to get around. Or I'm tired because I'm up for 4 a.m. meetings or workouts with my organization. We know that those aren't normal things, right? If the activities seem random or unrelated to what you may think the organization's mission and goals are, that can be a good indicator of potential hazing. We often combine possible signs of hazing with context clues surrounding the incidents. While hazing can happen anytime, it often occurs around specific times in the school year or at specific events. Usually, we see it happen in the first 6 to 12 weeks of a semester. This is often coinciding with when students are joining their organizations. We also see that around breaks from school or holidays, such as spring break when there's more free time and students have a chance to escape campus together. We also see it at retreats or tournaments or large events away from campus, initiation weeks, again, where students have that opportunity to do some different things in their organization that they don't do on campus. If you're starting to notice any signs of hazing, what can you say to your student? Where should you even begin? Let's talk about that now. And also, I want to acknowledge that even if you haven't recognized signs of hazing with your student, we still encourage you to have these conversations with them about hazing so that they know that you are there for them, you're knowledgeable about the subject, and you can set expectations that you have for them.
If you have noticed signs of hazing, or even if you haven't, a great way to start the conversation is when your student is considering or in the process of joining a student organization or team. Simple questions to start the conversation can be, what is the recruitment process like? What do you have to do to join? How are you feeling about the experience so far? Or how are they treating you? You can also be more explicit in bringing up hazing. Some questions to start with might be, did they promise not to haze you or make you participate in activities that make you feel uncomfortable? Have they kept their promises about not hazing? How are they treating you? Realizing that if they broke their promises, it is always okay to walk away from an organization. The important thing is to open up the conversation and balancing asking questions with listening to your student to avoid sounding like an interrogation. Again, you know your student and what works best for your relationship. We also recognize that if you're noticing specific signs of hazing, you may need to start the conversation immediately and address what you have noticed. The next two slides will take the possible signs outlined earlier and pair them with possible deep conversation starters. A great framework to think about this is starting the conversation with what you recognized and following up with an open-ended question. For example, you seem really tired. What's going on? Or what's up with these bruises? What's going on? This concerns me. You can also directly address the behavior you have seen and the current concerns you have, such as, do all members have to clean or drive people around? Or have you seen your other friends lately? I'm sure they miss you. Regardless of how you go about it, it is important to address the signs you have noticed and begin a dialogue. It is also important to acknowledge that there could be potential barriers that make it hard or more complicated for your student to open up about their experiences. These barriers may look like denial of the problem, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. Dismissing hazing as harmless, oh, it's not a big deal, no one's getting hurt. Silence, no one else is really making a big deal out of it, so it must be normal. Fear, I'm afraid I'll lose all of my friends if I say something, or I'm afraid it will get worse if I say something. Insufficient support for victims of hazing, what really can someone do to help? They aren't going to be able to stop them. Or even a misunderstanding that hazing is just part of the process. All of the older members say it's part of the process. Everyone's gone through this, so I won't be a true member if I don't. Or all orgs do it. Given these barriers, it can be challenging for a student to open up or to provide a really clear description of their experiences. If a student is having a hard time opening up to talk about hazing or other experiences within their student organization, consider using some of the prompts to dig in a bit more. To get more clarity, say, tell me more about that, or I'm confused, what did that actually look like? Also, if the student does open up, it is powerful to acknowledge the barriers that they may have had to overcome to do so. To affirm their experience, consider using phrases like, this is really brave of you. I can see this is having an impact on you, and I'm concerned. I appreciate you sharing this with me. I want what is best for you. Again, there is no right way or wrong way to have a conversation with your student, but the important thing is that being there for them and taking the first step to start a conversation.
Now the big question. If you suspect a student is experiencing hazing, what to do? Taking action based on your concerns can look different. First and foremost, continue to provide emotional support. Enforce that it was brave of the student to open up to you, and acknowledge that this is not an easy conversation to have. Empower your student to consider choices like leaving the organization or reporting the incident. Encourage your student to talk to peers, mentors, UT staff, or faculty. This helps remind your student that the campus is a community and no one is alone. Encourage your students to seek resources or help, which we will go more in depth in a couple slides. Or report the knowledge that you have, even if it's incomplete. Hazing can have a real impact on students, both physically and mentally. We encourage any students that have concerns about their own well-being or the well-being of a friend in regards to hazing to use these resources on campus. The Counseling and Mental Health Center, or CMHC, students can make appointments at no cost with a counselor on campus. They also have a 24/7 crisis line staffed by mental health professionals who can provide immediate emotional support or dispatch first responders should there be an emergency. BCAL, or Behavioral Concerns Advice Line. When students are concerned about the behavior of another student, staff, or faculty member, they can call BCAL and the university follows up on the concern. Parents can also call BCAL if they have concern about their student or another UT affiliated person's behavior. Also, there's Student Emergency Services, or SES. It's an office for students in various crisis situations that they can fill out forms online or call the number on the screen or walk in to the Student Emergency Services office to discuss their needs. For true inclusiveness in all organizations, it's everyone's responsibility to report suspected hazing. Do not assume others have submitted a report, and do not assume that the university already knows. While we are aware that hazing in the spectrum occurs, there are no specific incidents that may or may not have been reported. So you or your student can submit a hazing report online at hazing.utexas.edu by clicking the How to Report tab as seen in the screenshot on this slide. Reports can be submitted anonymously, and all reports are followed up on, regardless of how they're reported. We encourage individuals to provide as much information as they're comfortable sharing, but in particular, the name of the organization, the time and place of the incident or incidents, and details about the behaviors that occur. Withholding this critical information may impede the university's ability to fully investigate. The online reporting option is great for accessibility, but it's important to remember if you believe someone is in immediate danger, we encourage individuals to call 911. And also starting this summer in June 2020, all students will have access to the Live Safe app. The Live Safe app is designed specifically for the UT Austin community and allows students to report incidents, call 911, and access campus resources directly from the app. All reports are routed to University PD and Austin PD accordingly. We encourage all students to download the app before the start of the school year. Above all else, we know reporting may not always be the most comfortable, but each report helps break the silence around hazing and further ensures student safety at University of Texas.
So also on campus, we have lots of initiatives surrounding hazing prevention. We really are dedicated to preventing hazing before it happens in the first place. And that's part of why this presentation is being brought to you now. Just the more we know, the more we can all prevent. From orientation programming, which we're definitely engaged in the messaging there, to large-scale speaking events that we've hosted in the past, to plans that are being put into place into this next school year. Individualized trainings are also part of what we've offered to students, faculty, and staff. Really, we are all here to help educate not only our students, but our campus community on this topic and really try to prevent hazing from occurring at all. We really encourage you to speak to your student, as we mentioned before in some of the slides, about all these different opportunities that you see on your screen for them to get involved as they are interested. We're always looking for more students to get involved in our work and definitely growing our committee as we are engaged in really just keeping the campus safer. So it's been mentioned, but we also, more information can be found after this presentation online about our prevention work occurring on campus, about the committee we've talked about policies if you want to read more about the law, and even a list of organizations that have been found to be in violation of hazing. It can all be found at our hazing website, which is hazing.utexas.edu. And really you can see there with the screenshot that's been provided, the different tabs at the top for you to pull down information and really just dig in further if you want to follow up on this conversation. So as we kind of come to the conclusion of our presentation today, we really wanted to make sure that we can leave you with some final thoughts and really what we really want you to know, we wanted to emphasize. So just to sum it all up, I guess, we really want to make sure that we realize we have to break the silence around hazing. It's really everyone's responsibility to take action and to end behaviors through education, intervention, reporting, and providing support. And that educating yourself is really a huge part of that. So we appreciate your attendance and your listening to us today, and certainly just understanding this topic, but that the students' beliefs in the climate of hazing is ever changing. Just thinking about our environment as we're going into this fall, everything is going to be different. What we used to know could be a trend, maybe is no longer a trend. But we have to keep on top of new policies and new trends and the cases so that we can all stay informed and certainly learn from each other. Definitely starting the conversation. Again, we gave you some tips and tricks in this presentation. We remember that you might be the person that your student turns to or who they confide in should they be experiencing hazing. So being prepared and having an open conversation with them is going to be so helpful for them to understand where you stand on these matters and for them to be more open with you. We're all here to support you and your student. I think that's a big part of what we also want you to take away. There's so many campus resources. Chad just talked about a few of those. And we really want to always encourage you and your student to reach out to us if you have questions or just want to clarify something or wanted to report but weren't sure how. We're always here to double down on this information and really make sure that you have the right path forward. Definitely, we're always here to help and support. I think with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jenny to conclude for our presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. So thank you all for spending some time with us. If you have any questions afterwards, as Marilyn mentioned, feel free to look at our website, hazing.utexas.edu. You can also reach out to me personally if you want to have a dialogue or have any specific questions. My email address is jennifer.walker@austin.utexas.edu. And last but not least, really would appreciate your feedback on this webinar. We are always working to improve our resources for community members and folks like yourself. So if you have a moment, please go ahead and share your feedback with us. You can do so by going to the link there on the screen, bit.ly/UTHP Family Webinar. We'd appreciate that, and thank you all again for taking some time out of your lives to spend a little bit of time learning with us. So, thank you again.